Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show today. And on today's episode, I'm excited to be covering the awesome topic of personal branding and being an influencer. And specifically, why you need to ditch the act to reveal your whole self to build a personal brand that no one can compete with. So today's influencer guest is Leonard Kim, a TEDx keynote speaker and managing partner at Influence Tree, and a leading company in building personal brands. Before I introduce Leonard here, the subject to me is so exciting for me personally, as someone who's building his own personal brand and becoming an influencer in my own space, you know, with my own podcast brand here, The Open Mic, and what I do through the agency at the success of our growth engine community. It's no easy ride for sure. One hell takes a lot of work. So if you're in it for a get-rich-quick scheme, this ain't the journey for you. But for those who have, value to bring to the world and to prepare to put in the hard yards, it can be extremely rewarding. I could certainly vouch that for sure. I look back at everything that I do across our ventures, our executive, our board work, our agency work, and running the open mic and doing influencer work is one of the most rewarding things that, I get to do throughout the week and my working month, if that makes sense. So such as Leonard, hosting him here on the open mic, it's an absolute privilege. So I'd like to welcome to the show. Thanks for taking a busy time out of your schedule in Los Angeles. And it's about 10 p.m. out there in the evening this evening, Leonard.
Oh yeah, it's 10 p.m. and I think it's 6 a.m. for you. So we're on the opposite sides of the world, but we're out here just hanging out, and it's kind of awesome.
That's fantastic.
I wanted to thank you so much for inviting me on the show today so we could kind of discuss all these different things that have to do with personal branding, and I'm pretty excited to be here.
That's awesome. And, it's great because obviously I follow you on Twitter. I love your style. I love your directness. I love, that feel. And, I think when I was looking at my personal brand, obviously mine is The Open Mic. Obviously, it's quite obvious. It's a play on the open mic as it is. But I try and look at what people are doing and try and model that. And certainly, some of the crazy antics that goes off on the social web and things like that, and watching what you guys are doing, how serious you're taking it. And the success you're having is an absolute testimony. Leonard's bio is filled with accolades galore. If you're not familiar with Leonard, if you just jump on Twitter, search Mr. Leonard Kim, you're going to find out a little bit more about Leonard there. But just to give you a quick bio before I let Leonard speak about himself, filled with accolades from top media publications such as Forbes, CMO, Fast Company, Fortune, Adweek, Entrepreneur, and hundreds of others. And Leonard has over 620 odd thousand followers now on Twitter, something like that.
Something around there. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah, let's go with that.
So this is a serious influence in the community. And if you are looking to build up, what we always say to the listeners, looking to build up your brand, by all means, go and check Leonard out. You're going to learn a hell of a lot. So Leonard's also co-authored the book with his business partner, Influence Tree, Ryan Folland, called Ditch the Act, Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You for Greater Success. And if you go over to ditchtheact.com, you can pre-order that book that's going to be out around October. I think you can pre-order that on Amazon as well. And also, if you're going to go out and check out influencetree.com, and that's where he does free personal brand consultancy live on the air. Moving on just a little bit more about Leonard's background, really. Like all true entrepreneurs, this is what really excited me about Leonard's brand. It began in somewhat different circumstances. So for the listeners, if you're in that dark place at the moment and you're thinking there's no way out, and a lot of us have been there, we've been the highs of the mountains, the valleys of the lows. You really want to take a look at Leonard's backstory. And he admitted basically as being an expert or a self-described expert at failing. And according to his TEDx talk, why should you let fears guide you? And that was recognized by TEDx talk, Inks and Forbes and Mashable. By the end of 2011, he was so fed up with being constantly failing year after year that he wanted to end it all. Now, lucky for us and Leonard and his family, and also for the podcast show here, that didn't happen. But what he does well is within the niches of marketing people and professional development, and most commonly referred to as a personal branding. He holds loads of workshops, communities, speaks at conferences, works hand-on with executives and entrepreneurs who run 8+ figure businesses. and obviously consults and teaches the craft through online courses as well. But what brought Leonard to where he is today is a mixture of transparency, vulnerability, and being his true, authentic self. And if you are building a personal brand, you know, my personal advice, I'm sure Leonard's got far more experience than I have here from what I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years, is stop trying to be somebody else. You know, for the ones who are watching Gary Vee or watching Leonard or watching, you know, Frank Kern, or it doesn't really matter. Don't be those guys. Be yourself. That's where it's at, and the authenticity should come through. You know, and you've got to be able to put that out, give the value. You want to connect with Leonard, you can do that on Twitter at Mr. Leonard Kim, your Facebook, Leonard Kim, Instagram, Mr. Leonard Kim. You can get him on LinkedIn at Mr. Leonard Kim. And again, through his website at leonardkim.com or influencetree.com. And again, for those listening to this on audio, not watching it on YouTube or the blog, we'll put those in the show notes and the links, and please feel free to reach out to Leonard on that basis. So thanks again, Leonard. Absolutely awesome to have you here today. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time out your evening in Los Angeles today. But tell us a little bit more about this backstory and how you had to go back to the family and your grandmother and live at, you know, this bridge and this living in your car. And, you know, it's always great for people to understand, you know, what the backstories are and how you actually get to where you get to. Because it's never just instant success, is it?
No, it really isn't. And one of the things that I kind of realized when I was going through my journey is I hit a point where I became quite embarrassed about the type of situation I was in, because I didn't pay my electricity for about 6 months after a lot of failed ventures. And all of a sudden I didn't have lights on at home. I had to go and shower in the dark. I had to take my microwave out and put it into the hallway just to get food charged up so I could go and eat it. And in that type of situation, you don't want to go out there and tell people, hey, guess what? I didn't pay my electricity bill for 6 months and my lights are off. I was just going around saying, yeah, everything's okay, everything's fine, and everything's perfect, and yeah, business is great, and just trying to put on this front like everything was okay. And because I wasn't ditching the act and telling people what was really going on, what ended up happening is that started compounding even more. I ended up with an eviction notice. I looked at it and I'm like, okay, I got to call my mom, tell her I'm going to go live under a bridge. My mom's like, what? You're going to live under a bridge? No, let's call grandma. And she calls grandma, and grandma's like, hey, you could live with me for a while. I'm like, oh, I thought you disowned me. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me. And she still let me go and stay at her place. So while I'm there, I'm doing what any other person would do when they feel completely defeated. Instead of going out there and trying to get back on my feet, I just spent a few months just playing video games. Yeah. And I mean, video games are fun and everything, but you can only play those for so long until you kind of have to go back out there and work. My grandma kind of got sick and tired of me just sitting around and doing nothing with my life. So she's like, hey, Leonard, guess what? You're going to have to go and find a job. And I'm like, oh, no. What do I have to do? Find another job? Yeah, the dreaded job. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I don't know what I should do. So I went on Craigslist and I applied to like just, you know, all these random places. And then one place decided to interview me, and they said they'll pay me on my second month $2,000. They give me an iPad for my first month, $3,000 for the third month, and they'll pay me $5,000 for the rest of the time. I'm like, whatever. First job that I applied. If I take it, my grandma's not going to yell at me anymore. I should go and do this. Now, reality came into play, and I didn't actually earn an iPad my first month. And I didn't actually earn $5,000 a month either. I ended up earning about $2,400 or $2,600 over the course of 9 months, which is probably like, I don't know, $300 or something a month. Yeah, ridiculous. And it got to the point where I just couldn't keep holding on and keep holding on to that aura of success. When people would ask me to hang out, I'd be like, oh no, I'm busy working on this project. But then there came a point where I just broke, and I told my friend Josh, oh, you know what? The reason I really can't hang out with you is kind of because I like lost everything. And I had to go back and live with my grandma, and I'm like 30 miles away from LA. Yeah. You know, I thought he would just mock me, ridicule me, call me a loser, and all these other things, because that's just what I thought would happen if I shared what was really going on. So
there was that fear element then, Leonard, that you thought you'd be socially, disowned, and things like that, and that's obviously leading into that ditch the act sort of mentality. But is that what was the barrier there? Even until you raised your hand and say, I've lost it all, I've done it, that fear was building up and building up and building up, or was it?
Oh yeah, and I think a lot of people saw me as someone who was quite successful, or at least I saw myself as being successful, and I had such a hard time just admitting all the trouble that I was going through. But when I kind of opened up and admitted to him, like even though it was extremely fearful for me to actually do it, once I did, he was like, "Hey, you know what? Me and Evelyn, his girlfriend at the time, we'll come down, we'll drive to Orange County, we'll pick you up, and we'll show you a good time." They go and drive down. They take me out back up to LA. We go salsa dancing and they drop me back off and they pay for everything. And I'm like, whoa, this is unreal. I could open up and tell people what's really going on and they'll accept me. And it wasn't at that time that I knew that ditching the act was kind of what was going to propel me for long-term success. I mean, after that, I realized I couldn't live with my grandma forever. So I moved back to LA, borrowed a few $100s from my friend, stayed on the sofa, and started looking for work. Ended up having a friend who was working at American Honda at the time, hired me for a position over there, earning $16.24 an hour. Which I think if you translate that to pounds, it's about what, 10 pounds?
Yeah, like a little bit more these days. The dollar rate's not as good as it was, but it's about £11, £12. So it's not a lot per hour, yeah.
Yeah, and if you live in a city like London, which is probably as expensive as Los Angeles, you can't really do much. So I was taking a bus to work. I was buying like $80 of groceries a month. I was cooking. I was buying a $1.64 quesadilla over at the cafeteria for lunch, which was quite a bargain. Don't even know how that existed, but that was a blessing. But fast forward about 2 years, a new healthcare tax was released and $80 started getting taken out of my paycheck. And I never got a raise. I never got a promotion. And I was like, wow, that was my lunch money. That was my quesadilla money. What am I going to eat now for lunch? And I kind of got to the point where I was like, I got to do something to get out of the situation. What could I do? I tried applying for hundreds of jobs. No one hired me. Had a few interviews, though. I tried going back to school, but anyone who goes to school knows that's a long-term play. Yeah. And I just tried writing. But at the time, I didn't really know what to write about. I'm like, what am I going to write about? My successes I don't have? So I was like, my grandpa told me, my grandpa led his life with giving. Maybe I could go out there and give to others. Even though I had nothing to give, someone once told me that no one's absolutely useless. You could always serve as a bad example. So I was like, me, I'm that bad example. Why don't I go out there and tell everyone what not to do by sharing my failures? Yeah. 6 months into that, I had 2 million reads on my content. A year and a half, I had 10 million reads. And then things just started to propel forward. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
So you just found it. And just to be clear, that's an awesome amount of impressions and reads and views. And, I think, and a lot of the listeners out there who have been in those negative spaces, I think, it's testament to you. And I've certainly not been sycophantical when I say this, Leonard, but, it takes a lot of guts to stick your hand up and, and say, I'm a failure or I'm not who you think I am and moving forward. I think to me, when I describe it, when I do a lot of executive coaching, I describe it to the world and say, look, what if you describe what is the best emotion? What is the best emotion in life? And I open it up to the room and they'll say, oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other. And to me, it's relief. To me, it's relief. And that's my best emotion. And for all reasons that, if it's out in the open, it's transparent. And it's not whether you're a winner, a failure, home life, professional life, you've maybe just got an account that you're dealing with a client. But that relief, when you've not got that burden, you can actually release it. My headspace clears, I can think. If I'm being honest and transparent with people, and to me, so that favorite emotion for me is relief. And I can relate to where you were there, but maybe I've not quite been having to go live potentially under a bridge or anything like that. But certainly, for the listeners out there, if you've got any concerns, hit up, contact Leonard on Twitter. You can message him on Twitter at Mr. Leonard Kim. Ask him a question. He's very active on there. He's going to help you. Check out his brands. Go up to leonardkim.com or Influence Tree. Start to learn, and I'm sure Leonard, he'll connect with you on LinkedIn. He'll connect with you on Twitter, and he'll be happy to sort of get you started. And what I think the key message that I'm saying to the listeners and the audience: don't be frightened to sit there in silent suffering. Stick your hand up and speak to people who've been there. Speak to people who've walked a mile in your shoes or 10 miles in your shoes, because, it can be okay. And if you look where Leonard was in 2011, you fast forward to this recording show date in 2019. It's a short period of time in life, 8 years. You go from where Leonard was to where he is today. Yeah, determination, authenticity, we're going to get onto in a moment or two. It can be done. So make the start. Stop, pretending, ditch the act, don't worry about it. And in this case, Leonard's friends who took him out, if they're going to be ridicule you and they're not going to support you, well, arguably, you could even say that they're probably not friends that you want to be associated with if that's where you're at now. So the real people are going to get behind you, they're going to give you a leg up, and they're going to get you back on the way. So that's an awesome story there. And tell us more about it. So, they took the grocery money there, Leonard, and, so what happened next? How did that go?
Well, at first, when I first started writing, I kind of had another fearful moment, kind of like when I was talking to Josh. Yeah. I wrote something extremely personal, and I was sitting there for about 30 minutes, and I had the mouse in my hand and my finger over it going, should I click this button and let this go out into the world? And I think I had every single thought that could possibly come through my mind. Like, are people going to judge me, mock me, ridicule me, call me a loser? Are they going to go and troll me? Like, what's going to happen if I let this into the world? And I probably imagined every single horrible situation that I possibly could. And when you're leading with your failure, I mean, it kind of makes sense to have all those emotions too, because what Brene Brown says is when someone opens up with vulnerability and authenticity, and what I see it as is courage and strength. But then when I look at it in myself, I see it as fear, as shame and all these other emotions. And it kind of makes a lot of sense, because if you go and you flip into any type of movie, any type of TV show, any type of book, any type of content that you're watching or reading online, if you think about the most memorable things that you've seen, it's probably a story. Yep. And it's probably had a lot of ups, but a lot more downs. And when those downs happen, what you end up doing is you're able to connect with that person who's in that story. Yep. And you feel empathy for them. You feel compassion. You see yourself through their story as well. Whether that's a good emotion or a bad emotion, you can feel for them. And with ditching the act, when you kind of go out there and share those stories and that vulnerability, what it does is it builds these authentic relationships where you're building camaraderie with others. Yeah. And for me, what happened is when I first started writing, I had thousands of people who messaged me. Not only were they asking me if I could teach them what I did, they were also opening up about their deepest, darkest secrets, how they were facing suicide, how they were going out there and feeling these harsh emotions at work. And these weren't just regular people off the street either. These were successful people who were lawyers, who were McKinsey consultants, who were running huge businesses and investors and all these successful type of people. And I'm sitting here going, everyone's opening up to me, and these are people that I highly respect, who are earning 3 to 6 to 10 times more income than I was. I'm just a little old lettered, and everyone's just telling me about their deepest, darkest secrets, and we're opening up and we're creating camaraderie to the point where we have each other's backs. And I think one of the key things that really helped propel me into success isn't the amount of followers I had, isn't the status and the accolades. It's those deep connections I was able to create with others, because then you kind of create this little tribe where everyone's how can I go out there and help you get up? How can you help me get up? And everyone works together to move their way forward. Yeah, that's right. I think that's really the secret of what life is. I know Keith Ferrazzi the author of Never Eat Alone and Who's Got Your Back. He invented this new concept called co-elevation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of based off something that he did back in Yale when he was in one of those secret societies. Like most people, when you think of those secret societies like Skull and Bones and whatever else there may be, you're like, oh, they're plotting on how to take over the world, or they're doing like witchcraft, or they're doing something crazy in there.
Yeah.
But the truth is, what it is everyone just opens up and shares those vulnerable moments. It talks about the struggles that they're facing, and they're open and vulnerable, and they have deep connections with each other. And that's really all they're doing, just sharing their weak moments.
That's the secret, isn't it? That deep connection, that connectivity. What's interesting, if we just back up a couple of paragraphs, is when you said there, when you started, people started opening up to you about the deepest, darkest secrets. You've got lawyers, you've got professional people, high earners. It doesn't matter. And I think this is all about the subject we're going to get started on in a few moments about this ditch the act. And Leonard's going to open up into a little bit more detail about that. It's not what car they drive or how big the house is or which suburb that they live in. There is always a real story behind it. And if you can connect with that and that authenticity, that's where the value comes. And what's interesting, Leonard, is when I hear you say, it's not about the accolades that you get, whether it's Forbes or Inc. or TEDx, or, it's not about how many hundreds of thousands of followers that you've amassed. What it's about is that real connection and that authenticity. And I think that, again, if you're embarking out on that journey, we all get trolled online, so you always get those negative people out there. Don't worry about it. If your authenticity, much better to go out there and be you and connect with you. We had one last week where we put something out there about our new launch when we relaunched into the tech capital city of Leeds. And somebody's been offensive online, but it's just one person. And, I generally believe my style is unique. It's authentic. I don't try and copy any of the other people out there. And, I speak to the masses. If that connects with you, great. Keep listening, get some value. And I hope I help you on your way with your journey. Len's doing exactly the same. So, don't be fearful of making that start. It can be dark. It can be a big step. But go out there, but don't go out there and try and be somebody else. Go out there, find your purpose and be yourself. And I think, that's the biggest thing that I've tried to do because, I don't want to be anybody else. I want to be me because I'm best at being me. I'm not best at trying to be I'm not best at trying to be Leonard or Gary Vee or anybody else, or Henry Kaminsky. That's not what I am. I'm me. And ultimately, it's a real funny, Leonard. I interviewed a lady on the podcast called Chanel Rivera from Beauty and Hustle out in Vegas last week. And check out Chanel. And for the listeners, if you want to check her out, Beauty and Hustle, she's just been awarded one of the 10 companies to be included in the Together More campaign for Facebook, that $100 million ad campaign. So she's one of the 10.
Wow.
And check out Chanel. She's the most authentic individual, how she does it. No, very much like you, Lenny. No hairs and graces about it. I am what I am. This is what it is. And she started at FedEx on, I think, $8 or $9 an hour, as a part-time assistant, and then gone up to being just one of 10 companies, meeting Miley Cyrus at the Facebook Together More campaign. And she's done that about being her, focusing on herself. And so, whilst this podcast is all about what Len's doing, go a quick plug there for Chanel. She's awesome. Go check her out at Beauty and Hustle and go look out for the Facebook campaign that's coming out, the Together More one, and you'll see what the type of awesome work. And that's another referencing for authenticity about how you can do it, which is totally different to my style, totally different to Leonard's style. But again, it might connect with you better than what I do or Leonard does or something like that. But yeah, all about that. And so I've got to ask Leonard, and I'm sure the listeners have got to ask, talk to me more about the accolades. And I know it's not about that, but when you get recognized like that, you get on TEDx, you get Forbes, you must feel a sense of achievement and a confidence boost. So just tell me about some of those experiences.
Sure. Before I get into that, I kind of want to address what you said about copying other people, like going out there and seeing Gary Vee or Tony Robbins or Oprah. Like most of these people are like 10, 15, 20 years into building their personal brand. And then when people like us look at them and go and try to imitate them, we're starting at like step 189,241 when we're supposed to start at like step 1. And the reason why it's so difficult to kind of mimic those accolades or that success is because they started out on a much longer journey to kind of get to the point where they could kind of be that way. And we all have to go through those steps to kind of get there. And just like with the book that I have coming out in October, we're kind of realizing that since this is a brand new product, it kind of has to go through that same growth curve. Like, it's not immediately going to go out there and be featured in like Forbes and like all these big publications or immediately become a bestseller. Even though Ryan and I have pretty successful brands, we still have to go through that whole loop where first we're creating content around it ourselves. Then we're kind of moving into going out there and getting some small publications or small blogs to kind of talk about it to get bigger ones and bigger ones. Then next, it's going to follow the same path where it's in that mainstream media.
Yes.
So anyone who's going out there and thinking, oh yeah, I want to go out there and be in Forbes, and you put that as a goal for maybe tomorrow, it's kind of unachievable unless you kind of go through all these steps first.
Yeah.
And when you talk about these accolades and everything, I mean, the first time I was written up in a publication, I think it was a blog post I was written up in. I'm like, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing ever. Wow, this is so cool. And then like that excitement just continues each and every single time. And then once it's like Forbes or Inc. or Entrepreneur, it's like, oh wow, this happened again. Or if it's like being named the top digital market, it's like, what, me? How is that possible?
You're looking over your shoulder at somebody else, but it's not actually you.
Yeah, it's like, hey, did you get that award? Are you sure it was me? And then it's like so exciting every single time something like that happens, because it just continues on with more and more, and it refills that excitement. Yeah. Something that I really like to do is when you go out there and you achieve something, I like to use it to go in success stacks, so you could use that and leverage it to get more success.
Yeah.
So if you like get like maybe a small blog to kind of write you up, you could go and approach another small blog to see if they want to talk about your story. Then let's say you get like maybe 5 or 10 of those. You could go up to a few podcasts and see if they want to start discussing you. Then let's say you land about 5 to 10 of those. Maybe you could go up to like trade publications and talk about your expertise with them. And when you have a few of those, maybe you could go up to like small mainstream publications, then the bigger ones, then the bigger ones. Then you could get to the top of the list, like the CMOs and the Fortunes and the Fast Companies and things like that.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing. And if you're driving, you either pull over and back up and write this down, or come over to blog.thesuccessor.io/podcast and pick this up here. What Leonard's just explained there is a step-by-step process that, and I think it relates back into what he said. You just can't go out to be like Tony Robbins or anybody like that. There's a process. We call it here in the UK, Leonard, doing the hard yards, walking the hard yards. For example, we just put a post out there on inbound marketing, and inbound's very, very popular, as you know. And we got that published on Digital Donuts, which Digital Donuts here in the UK, it's a fairly buzzy following. And that's a great step, and it's a stepping stone. And that's not because they're disrespectful. They're an awesome brand, and we're super excited to have our guest blog post on there. But did you hear what Leonard said? Then listen to what he's just said. If you get that done, go and approach another one of a similar site. Say, hey, I got featured in Digital Donut. Here's an article. Would you like to do this? Get some backlinks going. Get some mainstream media. Get some push posts out of it. And then once you get, I think Leonard used the example of maybe getting up to a dozen or something, or 10, and then go up a level to the smaller publications, go and invite podcasts, all this type of stuff. And if you think it's easy, at the top of the show, we talked about it's not a get rich quick scheme. I'm here at 6 o'clock in the morning in the UK. Leonard's here at 10:30 at the night in LA after doing a shift at work. We're up at 4:30 in the morning, getting the studio ready. These are hard yards. This is recorded at this time. This is not a lie. We're up at 4:30 in the morning, recording at 6, getting ready. And that's not just rocking up to the mic and doing it. That's doing prep work yesterday, putting the hours in, taking the time out, doing the research, so I can have meaningful conversations with Leonard to give him the respect that he needs and deserves and is entitled to. And so it is a hard graft, but do it in steps. And if you're prepared to put the work in and you do it in steps, again, what I'll do, Leonard, is I'll make sure that we put those little steps up as maybe like a little PDF download on this page, so people can see what those steps are, from doing a few bit of content, doing it into the small stream, into the the blogs, into the mainstream, and then maybe build it up. So we'll get that over for you to check as well, and we'll probably do that as a little PDF download if you want that as well on the show notes. So that is excellent advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is very simplistic, but realistic. And, hopefully it stops people thinking they're going to go walk out on, traffic and conversion stage and in front of 20, 30,000 people in the world. That's not going to happen day one unless you've really got some serious subject that nobody knows about yet. But that's awesome. And building on that, really, I think ultimately, if we sort of move into the sort of detailed topic of this Ditch the Axe, we've talked about being authentic. So what would you really say, Leonard, are the golden rules around authenticity? And I know it's about being yourself, but, everybody's preaching on, me included, be authentic, be authentic, be authentic. But, how can we drill that down and help the audience a little bit better understand that and maybe share some examples from your journey of authenticity?
Sure. Well, I think for people lately, we've been told in every single angle that we go, any speech that we attend, any talk that we look up online, any podcast we're listening to, even at work environments, we're told we have to go out there and be authentic. Yeah. But no one is out there really teaching you like exactly how to do it. It's like, okay, you told me I need to be authentic, but then I probably sit at home and maybe I pull up a joint and I'm like rolling that at home and I'm just watching some weird shows with my spouse, and it's like, how am I supposed to be authentic? Like, what is my authentic side when it comes to like going out there? And then we're like, okay, this is what I do at home, but then now with my friends, I might be going out there and just going and causing havoc. Maybe I'm going out and drinking till like 2 a.m. and going and having a fun time with myself. And maybe with my acquaintances, I'm just chit-chatting a little bit, but not really revealing who I am because I have walls up. Then maybe when I see a CEO of a large corporation, I'm like, oh my God, will you talk to me? And you come up and you go and treat them in a certain way. Then when you kind of go backwards and you see like maybe your direct report, you kind of maybe talk down on them a little because you want them to do stuff. And then with your person who's like your direct peer, you talk to them in a certain way, which is kind of similar to your friend, but then your boss appears and you're like, oh, and then you're cycling back up to that person, or you're trying to avoid them to make sure that they're not drilling down your, breathing down your neck. And then the thing is, like, it's not just friends that you do that with. It's not just coworkers. It's not just family members. It's not just people you randomly meet. But if you hop on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all these other platforms, you're acting a different way on every single one. Maybe you're sharing pictures of your children on Facebook, but then on LinkedIn, you're only talking purely about business. And on Instagram, you're sharing your happiest life possible with like vacation photos and smiling in pictures, even though you probably didn't have a great day that day. You just put on that smile for that pose. And it's the reason we're doing all of this is because society has given us so many unspoken rules. They said, you have to be this way at work. You have to be this way at school. You have to be this way with your friends. You have to be this way online. And is that really our fault? Not really. The professors, the teachers, the online guides that we read, all these other things that we kind of pick up upon are telling us that we need to act a certain way in all these situations. Now, the problem with it is what we end up with is we have like 20 different personalities in our back pocket, and we put on these different little masks in every single situation. Now, last time I checked, most people get sent to the psychiatric ward when they have like 2 personalities.
Yeah.
And that's 2 personalities, and we're carrying like 20 different ones. Yeah. And like, there's no question as to like why our society is so filled with anxiety, depression, hopelessness, feeling like we're all alone. It's because we've been faking the fun, not just to ourselves, but to everyone else too. And when we hear that word transparency, we're like, okay, 20 different things. How do I go out there and put that all into one? And what we have to really do is we have to look at the good, the bad, and our version of the ugly. Those are the 3 components that we really need to incorporate into our life. So what we have to do really is we have to figure out how to take our digital presence and our in-person presence and have them reflect each other as well as possible.
Brilliant. That's awesome.
So let's say I grab this bottle of water and I'm like drinking it, and I accidentally go and I spill it on my shirt and it's all wet right here, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. This sucks. and I go and I wipe it up. Oh, now I'm all wet and everything. I go and I wipe it up. I go into the bathroom, and then I go about with my day, and I pretend it never happened, and I hope no one ever saw me, right? Chances are I'm not going to share that moment online.
Yeah.
Now, what I like to call this is a level 1 exposure. A level 1 exposure is something that happens in your life that you might have a slight discomfort with sharing, but then let's say you were to go out there and share that. It would kind of make you a little bit more human because no one else is doing that.
Yeah.
But now, before we get into more of this, let's say you had a tragic event happen in your life. You lost your business, you got divorced, some insane hurricane blew down your house, something crazy happened. Now, you've been so accustomed your entire life to share those happy moments at every single point in your life that once you go and share something like that, it looks like you're having a mental breakdown. And the reason for that is if for the last 5 years, everything was happy that you put out pictures that were of you having a good time, of you on vacation, of you going out there and getting promoted and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this level 4 exposure goes and appears onto your feed. People are like, okay, time to go avoid Mike. Don't want to be around him.
Yep.
But let's say we go out there and we start to reveal our whole selves, and we start with those level 1 exposures, and we move to level 2 exposures, which could be an argument with a spouse, an argument with a business partner, just something real that actually happens in the world. Then you move up to level 3 exposures, which is somewhere in between those arguments and a divorce, which are pretty bad, but not like detrimental. And then let's say it's time for you to share that level 4 exposure. People are going to come out of the woodworks because they actually want to help you get through that. They want to help you kind of move ahead. Like recently, my wife decided to leave her job, and that took a $8,000 a month hit on our household.
Yeah.
And shortly after, I forgot that a few clients' contracts were ending, so I lost a few extra grand from that. I'm like, okay, we're like about $11,000 down a month for our household.
Yeah.
What's the typical business owner going to do? They're going to go and they're going to hide that from the entire world.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, oh yeah, everything's going great, everything's going perfect. When, you know, for sure, this person's struggling to hit payroll, they're bouncing checks and all this other stuff. I just go out there and I'm like, yeah, I'm struggling. Things are just going horribly. I hop on the phone with the guy and he's like, yeah, I think you guys have the best thing going on. I want to go and work with you. I work with another guy. He's like, yeah, next year I'm planning to build like a South by Southwest on like the West Coast.
Wow.
And I want to pay you to work with me. I'm like, oh, sure. And then there's this other person that I spoke with. We're on the phone together. She's talking about how she just recently went through a divorce and how she's at a crossroads in life. And I'm like, yeah, I can help you. And she's like, oh yeah, we're working together now too. Then I have this Invisalign deal that's going on in a few weeks where I'm working with them. And I have all these projects just coming in because I was out there being vulnerable and sharing the struggles I was facing. So my friends are like, hey, let's go out there and let's see how we can help you get out of the situation. Another friend, Tara, was like, do you want a CMO position? If you really do, I could go and get you one. I'm like, okay. So it's kind of crazy. Like when you go out there and you start sharing these vulnerabilities, even if they're a level 4 exposure, you're able to kind of go out there and make things happen. Now, the level 5 exposures are things that you shouldn't share, which is like sex, which would be like lewd acts, like nudity, pornography, sending pictures of yourself. Yeah. Religion's a very controversial topic because no one needs any documentation, but everyone has strong beliefs, so that usually becomes very argumentative.
Yeah,
and
could be like political as well. I mean, I think it's more acceptable in the States to be openly, you know, put the red or the blue sort of, you know, political party. You know, in the UK, a lot of people hide behind the political views like they do the religious views, you know, because of that sensitivity. So I don't know if you see it on the what's your view? I mean, the religious is what it is, like you say, there's so many different takes on that. Love to hear your more thoughts on that, but also on the political side as well.
Well, on the political side, we're at one of the most polarizing points in our country when it comes to politics. Like, the right isn't really the right anymore. It's like the far right. And then the left has slowly moved further and further to the far left. So like if you bring up anything within one topic, sure, you could get a lot of positivity on one end, but you also come with a lot of backlash on the same side. So, I mean, if you run a business, I'm pretty sure you don't know who your client is, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. And if you want to like offend half of your audience, half of your client base, half of the people who can pay your bills, then I guess you could hold on to those political views and share them, but it's something that we consider a level 5 exposure too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've talked about vulnerability there quite a lot, and, mastering that is, you broke it down into the steps, Leonard, the level 1 exposure all the way through to level 4, and then obviously keep behind closed doors the level 5s. Is there anything else around mastering that vulnerability that you'd sort of want to sort of help the audience understand better?
Well, one thing that we have in our book is something called an exposure resume. And what that does is it has you list out different experiences that happened in your life that kind of fall onto like the bad side, because telling a good story is easy. Everyone knows how to do that immediately. No one really needs to be trained on how to share the positive events in their life. It's going out there and sharing those negative things. And when we go about, and then it's kind of making that picture a little bit more comprehensive. Like we're all accustomed that if we're going to share a story, like maybe of how I got my puppy, that we're going to share the positive sides. Oh, I saw them looking at me. They were so gorgeous and their eyes were just calling to me. But we leave out the side where we were in an emotional train wreck and we were at a huge point of depression and the brink of maybe committing suicide a few times. And then we had to go and look for that puppy because we needed a sense of companionship. Like, why is that part not part of the story? And then like, we only take one side of it. And I think what we really have to do is when we just share that one side of it, we're not being vulnerable. We're not being authentic. We're putting on our mask and showing the world what we want to show, when we have to share that other side too, so we have that comparison. And there's nothing wrong with that contrast. In fact, what it does is it has people connect with you at an even deeper level. It makes you more human, more relatable. Absolutely. And with this exposure resume, what we kind of do is we have people list down different things on different exposure resumes. Then we store it into the exposure bank and we rate it levels 1 through 4. Then we start with the level 1s, move to the level 2s, move to the level 3s, then move to the level 4s. So we kind of get into that order where people aren't sharing their deepest, darkest fear immediately, because, I mean, yeah, that's scary and it takes some time to really work up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're liking what you're hearing about this, you can head over to influencetree.com and you can check out that brand there. Obviously, you can check out leonardkim.com as well, but you can start looking at that, what there's online training, there's coaching, work with Leonard directly, and that's influencetree.com. Don't forget, you can pre-order your book, Ditch the Act, and that'll be at ditchtheact.com, and we'll put those links in the show notes as well. But that's also Leonard. And, I think it comes back to what you said earlier, doesn't it? Just about, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm ditching the act. It's a perfect title for the book. I absolutely love it. So thank you for that. And, when we started out with the questions, sort of digging a bit deeper, we talked about this authenticity thing. But now the transparency, I can't believe how much you've shared. And, you practice what you preach. You are authentic. We've covered the vulnerability. Wow, you've been so transparent. But, how do people get started with that? I think is that, because it's taking that step over, the importance of transparency throughout that personal brand. I know we've got these levels of exposure, the vulnerability or the authenticity, but talk to me more about transparency, Leonard, and how you best approach that.
Sure. So when you take a look at transparency, one of the things that you have to realize is our natural tendencies is to take those skeletons that we have and hide them in the closet. And sometimes we want to do more than just hide them into the closet. The more horrible it is, what we want to do is we want to bury it and bury it as deeply as possible. Yeah. And I think that's what everyone wants to do when they encounter something, like maybe they have a felony or maybe they got into a situation where they were in an altercation, or maybe they had a DUI. Like, for example, George Bush, when he ran for president over here in America, he spent his entire life working up to this moment where he could potentially take the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Everything that he's ever done in his life was for that one goal, to sit at that
The desk.
I guess the desk. So he's sitting out there, he's like preaching about what he does and all of that. And there's this one skeleton that he goes and buries, and the media goes and uncovers. And that's of a DUI that happened like over a decade before he even ran for office.
Yeah.
He tried to bury that deep and made sure it didn't come out. But what it did is it did come out. Yeah. And then that thing popped up out of nowhere, and it almost cost him his entire election. Yeah. Everything that he put his blood, sweat, tears, his entire life, his legacy onto was almost gone because he went out there and buried that. But now what you do is, if you think about those skeletons, if you put them front and center in front of you, what they kind of do is they kind of make you immune to any type of different attack.
Absolutely.
And now Barack Obama, he didn't have an easy time getting into the Oval Office because of ethnicity and a lot of other different struggles. But one thing that he didn't let hold him back were any of his skeletons. Like, there was an interview that he went on, and then the interviewer asked Obama, have you ever did cocaine before? And he's like, yes. And then, like, if he said no, he would have had the same exact problems that Bush faced. And if you ever watch like TV shows or like movies or anything like that, you'll always find that when someone's trying to hold that person, hold something over that person, like one of their biggest regrets or one of the biggest fears, if they go out there and they just open up about it and come up in front of it, that's usually something that's forgiven immediately.
Yeah, it's neutralized, isn't it? Like, and it stops that attack coming in.
Yeah. But why would you ever let someone else go out there and control your narrative when you could be in full control of your narrative? Like, I see this happen all the time where someone's like, oh, I didn't want to go and invest into my digital profiles. Yeah. Then 2 years later, someone comes by and leaves a 1-star review on their business, and that's the only review that's sitting over there. And now that's the entire person's reputation as a whole. Yeah. Why don't you go out there and start to build your narrative and start to control and own that narrative beforehand? Because after you have a singular 1-star review, what are you going to do? Just claw and fight your way out? Or if you get someone talking poorly about you in an article, that's going to go and be that top result in Google. You have the entire opportunity to go out there and control your own narrative. Yeah. And the only way to go out there and do that is by starting today and starting to go out there and share different elements of your story. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and putting all of that together.
Yeah, and like you say, it builds back into that authenticity as well, doesn't it? Say, hey, this has happened. Like you said, getting those skeletons right front and center, and being out there is going to add to that authenticity. You know, it's going to, you're not worried. You can concentrate. I think, I share a story, Leonard, in 2012, and all my clients know this. I cover it on podcasts. I'm not embarrassed about it, but for first-time listeners here who are picking up this, back in 2012, we were a non-quoted PLC, like a publicly traded company in the UK, and we had a profitable business trying to go through a Series B, trying to raise over £4 million, so about $6 million or $5.5 million in VC. We were already venture capital backed, but the financial crisis wasn't over. We were edge betting. We were highly geared, and we lost a £12 million. So what's that? About $15-16 million business into administration. And when I go out there as an executive coach or sit on people's board as a non-exec, I don't hide that. I tell them that, by the way, that personally cost me nearly £500,000 personally in stock options, cash investments, things like that. And I don't say that to boast, because that's a hell of a loss. You talk about losing $8,000 a month or $10,000 a month. It's a lot of money. In one foul swoop, by signing and appointing the administrators, it was nearly £500,000 sterling. So I don't know, $600,000+ in one go. And then my original fear when I came to the market is doing exec coaching and sitting on people's boards to show them how to turn around the business, position them better, one of the challenges that I faced, Leonard, personally was, hey, I'm trying to, not convince, but get people to hire me to show them how to do this. But I've got this rack of failure behind me. And the reality is, in my career since 1994, I've had 2 6-figure and a 7-figure exit. So real strong successes like you in different areas, but still successes that you can build on, and you can think, wow, I look back at 34 years old, I had a 7-figure exit. At 27, I had a 6. At 30, I had a 6 exit. I think, wow. But, at 42, I had a 7-figure loss, a £12 million business, and then a personal loss of 6 figures. So I think, well, hey, I'll just get it out of the way. And the way I dealt with it, and it wasn't keeping the act up, Leonard. It's true how I ditched my act, was I thought, well, I sat down, I looked at all the things that I learned about being successful, and then all the things I learned about being unsuccessful when I hit the floor and crashed in 2012. And I thought, well, actually, I learned far more things losing all that money and who my friends were, how to position businesses, about what the mistakes I could have avoided, where I was responsible. There was some force majeure in there with the financial crisis as well. But I sat down there and I analyzed it. So when I go to people, and as an example, if you're struggling to say, how can I ditch my act? And, this is Leonard's expert area, not mine, but I'm just sharing my personal experience here. I go to boards and say, listen, I look more out of losing a £12 million business in administration that stung me for $500,000 personally than I ever did out of being successful, out of, all the glory days of the exits. And one of the first times I ever followed you, Leonard, I picked you up on Twitter, and I'll keep it clean on the language. And I don't know if you remember the post, but you got quoted for being successful in Forbes or Inc. or TEDx. And somebody came on Twitter like, oh, Leonard, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. You're so successful. You're so successful. And I said, I'm going to keep it clean, so we've got a clean show. And Leonard put a post out there and said, yeah, it's like being pregnant. Everybody congratulates you, when you are pregnant, but nobody sees how many times you've been shafted throughout your life and things like that. That's the post that you put out there. And I don't know about 1 or 2. Do you remember the post? I don't know if you remember the post, but how many times you've been shafted along the way. And ultimately, I sat there and I thought, wow, I love the way that this guy puts his stuff out there. And you nobody sees all the knocks that you take and all the punches that you have to take. They're all clapping you and doing this when it's great, but they don't see how many times you've been, hammered and do that. But that's what, and that's one of the first times I connected with you on there. I thought, I've got to follow this guy. And I've followed you ever since. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show and get this insights. And so that was me ditching the act. I'm no longer the CEO of this publicly non-quoted business here. I'm ready to go. And it's like, whoa, I've just lost all this money and I've not really got a job. And I lost a 6-figure income and I'm listening, what do I do now? And, I tried to hide it for a while, but then I thought, no, it's best just get out there and tell it. And for me, there ain't a client that I've worked for who I haven't shared that story. Not because I'm proud or embarrassed. It's just me. And that's a part of my life that turned me left to right and got me where I was. And that was 2012, it's 2019. So it's a year later than your sort of maybe low point. And in the last 7 years, then I turned it around, grown, influencer brand, podcast, HubSpot agency, venture capital arm, all these things that I brought back with my team, an immense amount of work and graft, but you can do it. But and I genuinely believe, as the listeners, if I hadn't have had the courage or the openness to sort of go out there and tell everybody, it's like Len said, somebody could have said, hey, Mike, I'm hiring you, but hey, I've checked Companies House, that's like our public register. Did you go into administration? And then how do I deal with that? So get it out up front. But yeah, that's a true story. And it's probably something you can resonate with, with your journey as well.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I want to thank you so much for opening up about that. And I mean, a lot of people, we all do go through struggles, and I was talking to Dr. Linda F. Williams. She's a psychotherapist and an executive coach about 2 weeks ago. And she said something to me that really struck a chord. She's like, Leonard, you know what? You're absolutely blessed. And the reason you're blessed is because you've experienced these hardships and all this pain at such a young age. Because let me tell you something. Everyone goes through these struggles. Yes. So most people go through them when they have a house, when they have a wife, when they have kids. And then that fallout is so much bigger because they aren't prepared for a situation like that. But you're so blessed because you kind of got all those situations out of the way first. And I was like, whoa, I never thought about it that way, but that's an amazing way to look at it. So I'm going to hold on to this. And I think if you really have that mindset that everyone is kind of going to go out there and fail at some points in their life, and a lot of people that you're kind of speaking with already have, that means what you're doing is by sharing that, by looking at that thing that you have that you're kind of fearing to share, what that fear really is, it's an indicator that you're onto something that's actually going to connect with a lot of other people, because so many other people feel that exact same fear about sharing what you have to go out there and say, that they're not saying it and they're waiting for you to say it so they can go and connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's so many similarities here. And if you sat out there, like you say, connect with Leonard, go over to influencetree.com. You can shoot us a message using the hashtag #TheOpenMic, or if you listen to this inside our community app, drop us a message in the comments below or on the blog, and we'll get those answered, or we'll make an introduction to Leonard. If you don't want to reach out to him directly, we'll make an introduction to you, and I'm sure he'll be there to help. So when we talk about personal branding, many different takes on that. You know, is that having a logo? Is that you being authentic and things like that? In your own words, Leonard, the 101 on personal branding in your view, I'd love to get your take on it and how you see it.
Sure. So if you really think about it, every single person has a personal brand, whether they know it or not. You could just take one walk into your corporate boardroom meeting, and then you could go and look around and look at the 10 other people in the room. You're like, okay, class clown's over there. Okay, person snoozing off over there. Oh, there's a suck up who's trying to get all the attention from the person. Oh, look, there's the eager beaver who's raising her hand every single time so she could get some attention and provide feedback. And you could kind of immediately associate every single person that you ever encounter, like right off the bat, with something. And you've probably been able to do this ever since high school, junior high, maybe even elementary school. And it's our natural tendency to go out there and kind of connect people to just how we're seeing them. So knowing that everyone kind of has a personal brand, it's kind of like, what do you have to do with it? First, you have to realize kind of like what you feel are your best traits and how you want to be perceived, or how others are already perceiving you. Then you have to go and take it and meet at the intersection of where you are. One of the best ways to really do this is to get like 2 different sets of Post-it notes. Let's say one of them's pink and one of them's yellow. Oh, let's see, I have some Post-it notes over here. Let's say you get one set like this, and then what you're going to do is you're going to write like one word onto each of these Post-it notes, and one word kind of describes you. So like, let's say I go here and I write funny on this Post-it note.
Yeah, got it.
And then I write like maybe 20 other things that describe me. On the other color set, what I want to do is I want to pass these out to friends, family members, colleagues, people who barely know me, and then have them write one word on each of these. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a wall, like maybe the one behind me, then I'm going to start grouping these Post-it notes together and start sticking them together.
Yeah.
Now, let's say I write I'm funny, and no one else writes I'm funny. Chances are, I'm not funny. But let's say I say I'm funny and 3 other people are saying I'm funny. That's probably a characteristic, that trait that I really do have. Yeah. And I think what the hardest thing is for people to do is really figure out like what really makes them stand out, what they are all about and things like that. But when you kind of group these together, they usually fall into 3 main categories. One could be personality trait related, one could be work related, and one could be hobby or philanthropic related. Yeah. And when you kind of combine those together, you kind of get a core element of who you are, not who anyone else is, but who you are.
DNA of you, isn't it?
Yeah. And what you kind of do with that is that gives you the foundation of kind of where to start. The next thing you want to do is you kind of want to figure out what your voice is. What I like to do for that is it involves a little bit of copying, but not really. It's you take three people that you really look up to and admire. Like maybe one of the things is you felt you were funny, so maybe you find like a comedian that you really look up to. And then one of the things that came up is maybe you like passionate or something, and then you go and you find someone who's passionate that you look up to.
Yeah.
Then you go and find someone who's like for the other thing. And then what you do is you kind of take their three different writing styles. And what I like to do is if they wrote a book, if they wrote an article, if they've done something, I like to write word for word exactly what they've done in their post and get all three styles. Now, what will happen is when I start writing or I start talking, naturally it's going to imitate their styles for a little bit, but after doing this for like maybe 10, 20 times, you can do that in public, in private, whatever it is. After doing this for a little bit, what naturally emerges is your own voice, because you're taking pieces of these three elements that are already you.
That's amazing.
You're putting it into your own way.
And that tonality comes through.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting how that happens, because you naturally want to go out there and reemerge. You want to come out there and you want to go and shine. You don't want to go and imitate these three people. So even though it's your foundation, it kind of allows you to go out there and just be yourself. And
that's
cool how that works.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really interesting because, you know, in the world of digital and all that, you know, the old-fashioned post-it note, sticking out two different colors and grouping those commonalities and or discounting them. And I suppose it gets rid of some of that, you know, delusion that, like you said in your example, if you think you're funny but nobody else thinks you're funny, you know, it's like, well, okay, that's like a reality check. And, you know, we all don't we sometimes, just to say, hey, this is where I'm actually at. But I actually love it. I remember listening to Ryan Levesque in his Ask book originally, where he used to, I mean, what resonated to me in that little part of his book was he used to study Gary Halbert, the copywriter, and obviously as I always class myself as a trainee copywriter. I'm never what I call a full copywriter, but as a trainee copywriter, I love Gary Halbert, you know, Drayton Bird, people like that. And Ryan Levesque said when he ordered the Gary Halbert material, he physically got the materials in like a binder, and he got and he physically copied every single. He literally rewrote Gary Halbert's copy, which is, you know, if you're not quite sure who Gary Halbert is, like what regarded as one of the greatest copywriters of all time. Gary's dead now, but you know, obviously some boy takes that over. But Bond, should I say, takes that over. But he did a similar example there to what you've just said, that because he wanted to see where the styles were, the accents were, you know, the statements were, or whatever. And then eventually, obviously, Ryan Levesque makes an amazing living and serves plenty of entrepreneurs by taking that skill and adapting it to his own style. And that's very, very similar to that tonality example there you've given us. So it shows that, you know, we've got two major players in this space saying a similar thing in different ways. You know, go and try that out. And whether that's copywriting, tonality, you know, go and look at these things, what Leonard's saying. These are absolute gold tips. And, you know, hey, write this down. Go and study the people who you like, comedians, you know, philosophers. You know, a big philosopher, hero of mine is Jim Rohn. Oh, Jim's dead. We lost him in 2008. But, you know, I own every piece of work that Jim has, and I study it and I listen to it. And you know, you take that forward and develop it and apply it into your own, you know, authentic sort of view. And that's great advice, Leonard. And never heard it done that way before, but sure. How do you think you could do it after 20 times? Is it so many pieces? Do you think it's so many months or so many weeks? What do you think that real tonality comes out? It depends how much you write or speak, of course, but can it be mastered reasonably quickly to get that identification?
Well, yeah. I mean, personally, when I look at my life, and interesting that you like Jim Rohn, I actually won his gift set for his whole CD collection.
Brilliant.
Collection. Awesome. I was like, yes, I got it all. But in regards to me, I followed and mimicked three styles before I started writing. One, before I even wrote anything, I was kind of obsessed with Copy Blogger, which was Brian Clark's channel. And I read every single thing that he wrote, and I wrote all that down too. And I went to high school with Neil Patel, and his life's a little bit similar to mine.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of his content, and I kind of rewrote that too. But then they kind of weren't all naturally like me. And then all of a sudden in 2013, I discovered James Altucher, and James Altucher's style was a lot more similar to mine. I'm like, wow, this guy's just like me, except he made a lot more money and he lost a lot more money than I did. And once I started writing all three of those different styles and I got that third element and piece there, I wish that came to me sooner, and I wish I discovered that sooner. But I was reading James Altucher from about April 10th, maybe April 10th, 2013. Yeah. Then by May 15th, 2013, I was able to write my first post.
Oh, amazing.
And I'd say about May, June, July, I'd say about July or August, my natural voice kind of emerged. And it just became something that was consistent. And it was pretty interesting how that kind of all emerged. And at first, I was heavily borrowing from other people's styles, but I mean, naturally, what ends up happening is your own style just emerges, and you're able to kind of own who you are and not feel any shame or any mockery or anything like that, because who you are is coming straight through.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Some great tips there. So tell me, as we start to wrap up, Leonard, here, actions we need to take to dominate the market. We've covered it ain't a quick get rich quick. We've covered it takes work and the hours and the hard yards. But, you know, in your view, if you'd got, you know, the TEDx and it was only about dominating your market, give us your view on that. I'd love to learn from you.
Well, you have to kind of flip it around. You have to take it through the consumer's journey.
Yeah.
What happens when you read an article that's like 500 words and doesn't teach you anything?
Yeah.
You just close it and go back on your way. What happens when you read a piece of content that you actually learn something from, you feel wowed by, you feel an emotional connection with, or something like that? If you look at the user's journey, they either share the article, they talk about it with their friends, they like it, they comment on it, they look the author up, they go through all these different paths. Let's say one of the things that they do is they look you up because they're like, wow, this was phenomenal. I need to know who wrote this. Chances are they're going to go onto your website and read your bio. And when they read your bio, if you have a few lines there and it's not that detailed, they're probably going to be like, okay, cool, and go on their way.
Yeah.
But now if that bio kind of has your whole compelling story into it and shows the different things that you do for work, one, they're going to fall in love with who you are. Two, they're going to be able to click off and see what you do for work. And if that's something that they're interested and need services for, they could go and work with you. Or they could, if that's not something that they're interested in, they can follow you for the rest of your journey.
Yeah.
So now when you kind of look at that as the path of what people go through, what's the most important thing that people are going to need to see from you? It's going to be your bio. So what you need to do to dominate that market is to make your bio as comprehensive as possible. At the first line, you could start with your accolades and the successes that you have. The next paragraph, you could talk about what you do now, the problem you solve, and all of that, and kind of get into that nitty-gritty detail that's hyper-focused. But after that, what you kind of want to do is you want to kind of show people how you got to where you are today. So that's by talking about the early life, about the struggles that you faced, about how your parents raised you, where you grew up, if you had siblings, what kind of journey you went through, your first relationship, what college was like, what your first job was like, and all the way up to where you are today, and kind of fill in all those details. Because those details, the devil is in the details. And when I was talking to my new client and we were kind of going through that bio call with her, she talked about how her first job was over at Safeway. And I was like, wow, my dream job when I was like 16 was to go work at Albertsons. And then like Ryan was on the line with me too. And then she was talking about how she became a theater major, and Ryan was a theater major. And my wife Angie was listening to the call too, and she was talking about one of her passions as a kid was going out there and rollerblading. And Angie likes rollerblading. And those three elements touched every single person who was on that conversation. And when you really think about it, we leave so many details off the table. And is that what we really should be doing when maybe all these little things that we think are minute details are what really drives true connection with others. So once we have that bio set up, then we have to go and focus on the content we're creating. How do we go out there and make that content, that blockbuster content where people are like, wow, I had a takeaway?
Yeah.
That's by going out there and looking at what the two biggest forms of content are that kind of make those reactions. One is personal stories, and two is thought leadership. Now, you could either go heavily into the personal story direction, or you could go heavily into the thought leadership direction. But what if you did something else and you kind of merge those two together?
Yeah.
Then you'd have the most powerful type of content that's really going to go and connect with so many people.
Because you're helping there as well as sharing that journey. And you know, like you said, Angie, your wife there, she likes rollerblading. Oh, you know, whether she still does or she did it was junior. You know, it just connects, doesn't it? And it's like, oh, they're one of me, or I'm part of that, you know, and that's what it is, isn't it? And that's really powerful when you blend that together. I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like most people, when they make content, they'll be lucky if they get like a few hundred views on it. But if you're following a blockbuster model, maybe that singular piece of content you're creating is getting 5,000 people reading it, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's kind of endless with how far it could go. And what's the ROI on that? It's a lot more than the effort we get for the 200 views.
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. They're amazing insights, Leonard. Thanks for sharing those. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah. So the value that you provided on the show, Leonard, is far more than I could have ever expected. For the audience that are in for a real treat, thank you very much indeed, especially with it being so late over in LA tonight. Thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate you being on the show. So as we start to wrap out now, you know, really quick summary for those interested in finding more about why you need to ditch the act and reveal your whole self to build that personal brand that no one can compete with. Leonard, if we were to sort of drill down the last hour or so that we've spent into sort of 3 quick pro tips, and I know it's hard because there's so much value that you've provided. What would be the 3 core things that you would want somebody to focus on to get rid of the noise, take the filler out of it, concentrate on these 3 things, and that's going to get them on the way? How would you summarize that?
Sure. Well, the first thing would be to kind of take that philosophy of going out there and sharing your whole self and adapting that into your memory and realizing you can't just share the good, but you also have to share the bad and your version of the ugly.
Yeah.
The next tip would be to go out there and figure that there are 5 levels of exposure.
Yeah.
And you can't go out there and share that most vulnerable moment immediately, but you have to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 and kind of ease your way into it. And then the next thing that you really have to do and focus on is going out there and creating that bio, because that bio is going to be the most important piece of real estate that you have existing on the internet. Because how else are people going to make a deep connection with you? It's going to be by reading that bio.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like you said, just off that, what I picked up, and my show notes, Leonard, are full. I've written over words here. It's that much value here. Then from that bio, as Leonard said, you can go and, you know, get those farms of content and blur that together with thought leadership and stories and really sort of, you know, build that following. So that's amazing. Thanks ever so much again, Leonard. It's been an absolute pleasure. To confirm, if you want to learn more about what Ryan and Leonard are doing over there, you can visit influencetree.com. Please check out leonardkim.com as well. That's amazing. And obviously Leonard on Twitter at Mr. Leonard Kim. We'll put all the social posts below. And don't forget to order the book, Ditch the Act. And that you can get that at ditchtheact.com. And that's on pre-order. I think it's out. Is it about October, Leonard, that's coming out?
Yeah, it's scheduled according to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The date of release is October 25th. So if you pre-order, it should be there soon.
Absolutely, that's great. Well, like I say, we really appreciate you being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Oh, anytime. Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
It's absolutely great. So as always, listeners, we hope you've had awesome value from Leonard. We appreciate you tuning into this episode and continuing your growth engine development. And as always, get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen, and we'll see you on the next Open Mic Show real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.